Todd Plesko, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Kurt.
I'm really
Good to see
excited
you.
to have you on the show
Yeah, I am too.
because when the
Always.
show was put together, I said to myself, I'm going to bring on interesting guests,
Well,
right?
I'm humbled.
Guys who are great musicians, but also have a story to tell, right? You have a background, you have a lot of hobbies and interests that I think the listeners are going to love to hear about.
We'll see.
So you're the guitar player of SYNR.
I am.
And in my mind, SYNR is one of the best bands in the Tampa Bay area. And I'll tell you why I say that, okay? Because every time I go see a SYNR show, I am highly entertained, right? The way you guys move around the stage, the song selection, right? You guys seem to bring an energy, right? It's not just some boring show. It's like you're seeing 5 guys on stage that are moving, and you have multiple singers, and you guys harmonize. So tell me how SYNR started.
So it was, it was a concept, I think, between one of our singers, Steve, and the bass player that goes back many, many years. And the whole idea was, I guess there are 3 pieces to it. One you mentioned, which is no wallflowers. Whoever's on stage, energy, nonstop energy, 3 sets, which, getting into my 50s, working a big job, career can be a challenge. So that was number 1. Number 2 was we weren't going to play the same old standard set lists that cover bands do, Florida, anywhere, Midwest, doesn't matter. There are songs that we've all been playing for 30, 40 years in some cases, and it just gets boring. All the same bands play the same songs. And so we weren't going to do that. So the theory was we're going to SYNRize some of these songs, and it wouldn't just be standards. So when you come to a SYNR show, what you see is oldies, country, rap rock, maybe a few standards in there that you would know, all songs you would know, and then some heavy stuff. At the core of the band, it's a hard rock band. And then we would throw in some of this extreme pop. These are all top 10 songs that everybody knows that have, topped the charts at some, in some era. So when you go from Mashed Potato and Runaround Sue to, Country Girl and Chicken Fried to Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars to Godsmack and Metallica, it tends to catch some attention. The third leg of the stool was, top equipment. So, one of the singers and I, he mostly runs sound, but our stage, light show, the fog, the smoke, the TV monitors, all that, for a cover band, we invested heavily into it to make sure that we're putting on the best show possible. No wallflowers, lots of energy, lots of movement, big stage show, lots of subwoofers, lights, fog, and then this unique set list that I think works.
And the funny thing is, I'll hear a lot of different songs when I'll come to your show. So it's not like you're playing the same songs every show.
We try.
Right? But what's the process involved? Like, how do you guys get together and decide what you're going to learn, what you're going to play, what you're going to take off?
Yeah. I mean, we have 2 lead singers, that are, icons in the area.
So
They've been doing it a
there's
long
David.
time. David and Steve.
Okay.
And they're both great. And they're both different, and they're both great vocalists, great
They
performers.
work well together, I think.
Work incredibly well together, well liked in the community. They're rock stars. So with any band, in my experience, having been in, dozens of bands now, cover bands over my playing career, it all begins with vocals. So, the first question is, can we achieve it vocally for whatever tuning we're playing in? A lot of cover bands make that mistake. They try to do a song that's too big for the vocalist, and it just either A, the vocalist struggles to hit some of the higher notes or higher range, or B, the other musicians can't harmonize, or worse, C, they can do all those things, but it fries the voice out for the rest of the set. So it all begins there. Can we achieve it? Can we do justice to the song?
Very smart.
Right. I mean, if you can't, don't. The answer is no. And sometimes, in this modern area, we can tune down. And if you tune down too far, it just doesn't sound pure to the song, even though we're trying to, SYNRize it and things like that. Then, the next sort of litmus test is, does it serve our uniqueness, right? We have 2 singers. So we do a lot of songs where they're both singing different parts, verse, chorus. Like some of the rap rock is great because it's high energy. And, there's maybe some rapping in it. Maybe there's some big vocals in it. Maybe there's some harmonies, there's big drums. All that stuff fits us perfectly. And then, of course, 3, is it a chart topping song from any era? And again, from any genre. And I think that's what makes us unique. So that's where the process begins.
And plus you have to be able to play it, you're a phenomenal guitar player.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that, you got to be able to sing a song and you got to be able to play it well too.
Fair enough.
And it seems like you always find a way to put a proper lead on every song that you guys do.
Well, I've been faking it for a long
But
time,
sometimes
Kurt.
it's tasteful. Sometimes less is more, right? So it's
Yeah.
not like you have to overplay songs. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then you also have a very good singing drummer too.
Yep.
So you basically have 3 guys in your band that sing well.
All 5 of us sing as far as harmonies go, but yeah, essentially 3 lead singers, and that adds a fullness to it, especially when, in the case of this band, we have a guy that actually knows how to run sound and bring out the best in those lush vocals, the right reverbs. I mean, that stuff's
Well,
very,
let's
very
face it, every
important.
room is different. And you guys do indoor shows, you do outdoor shows. You've done some bigger shows, like you did Daytona Bike Week once. That's a big show.
Yep.
And then you've done some smaller bars too in your area. Todd, let's talk about some of your musical influences because when I first, well, let's tell this story first. Let's tell how I met you. So, as you know, I was always looking to put a band together. This is before Jacked Up, and I think you were on Band Mix or Craigslist, or you had an ad out that you
It's
were looking for a
Craigslist.
band, right?
Yep.
So
Back in the day.
back in the day, this is several years ago. So you were looking for a band. I was looking for a hotshot guitar player. You and I spoke. We decided to meet in Brandon. I think I came up to Brandon, right? We had a
I
beer
think
or
we were
something.
speaking before I even moved to Florida.
Really?
Yeah, it's a great story.
Wow. I know we met for a beer and we immediately hit it off as friends.
Yep.
Like we had similar interests outside of music and we immediately hit it off.
Yep.
And then we talked about music and you were like, yeah, man, let's get together and jam.
Yep.
Right? There was no doubt.
Yep, no doubt. And then we did.
Right. And we did. And you played live with me as On the Rocks. You
Yep.
played live with me as Jacked Up.
Yep.
In fact, you were at the famous, we were just talking about you recently on the previous podcast.
That's trouble.
I had a situation where we were playing Coquina Beach and you filled in and you learned our stuff really fast, which is another good thing about you is that you do your homework and you can woodshed. And if Todd's a great guy to come on and be like a hired gun, you can come into a band with short notice and able to play.
Yep.
And you did that with us on more than one occasion.
Best way to learn. I mean, best way to become a decent performer. Put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Woodshed it.
So do you remember Coquina Beach was one of our first seafood festivals and I had cut my hand.
Yeah, it was great.
30
Yeah,
seconds
rock and
before we had
roll.
to go on, I cut my hand with a knife.
Rock and roll,
And
man.
I'm bleeding profusely. And
on the bass.
I still have the scar here. And
it's classic.
yeah, it was classic, but it was such a stupid thing on my part to do, right?
Packed house.
Meanwhile, like we're actually literally on the stage, and I'm at the last second, I decided to take out a cord out of a box, and I had to rip it with a knife, and I put the cord in, cut the hand, tape it up, bleeding. It's all over my bass. You looked at me. Everyone was like, "Are you going to be able to play?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." And sure enough, as I played, blood was dripping all the way down my fretboard.
Rock and roll. I'd love it. So I do remember that. I remember it being full, the festival. I remember it being a beautiful, pretty warm day. That happened, blood, and I just kind of looked over and I was filling in and I'm like, fuck it, rock and roll. Let's do it. So as a performer, when something like that happens to another bandmate, and it happens. I mean, it just happens. Guy gets in a car wreck on his way to a gig, some catastrophe happens. It's important for the rest of the band to pick up the slack. So I do remember that show and we only had a set, 14 songs or whatever. And I said, you know what, I'm going to bring the most amount of energy I can, try and help my buddy Kurt out because he's bleeding profusely all over his bass guitar and all over the stage. And I'm like, it's rock and roll.
No, we pulled it off. It was a great set.
Yeah, it was a good set.
And as a result of that show, I got much more work. I got more seafood festivals as a result of us being
still waiting for that royalty.
But the cool thing about Coquina is that we could see the palm trees, you could see the Gulf, and you could see the beach there, and you could smell the seafood being cooked and all that. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But that was one of our early shows. I mean, that was when Dana was our lead singer.
Yep.
Right? We had Timmy on drums.
Yep. Miss those guys.
Yeah. No, we're gonna have a reunion soon.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's gonna
That's
be great. So, and then we played other times we played together as well and other opportunities.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the story to me, it's fascinating. So I was leaving Indiana to come to Florida. We had ties here. We had ties on, Siesta Key. We had a small business there, but we, raised our kids, Brenda and I, in her hometown of Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we were there like 17 years of our marriage. And great musical years for my kids, et cetera. But when we made the decision to move down to Tampa, I put out a Craigslist ad. So I had 3 people that I engaged with. And I'm super proud of this because I played with all 3. And this is just talking on the phone, 1,200 miles away, getting to know each other. And it's you, my buddy Steve Williams. They're all bass players. That's pretty wild. Steve Williams, who I'm really close friends with now. He's starting an Alice in Chains tribute band, which is going to be incredible, and Clay Schleitweiler. And so we started having these conversations, never met, same deal, met, had a beer, hit it off, and we've been good buds ever since.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
It's
awesome
super
story.
cool. Yeah.
So growing up in Indiana, what were your musical influences?
I grew up in Michigan and I met my wife totally, to me anyways, rock and roll story. I met my wife on spring break on the beach, South Padre Island, Texas in 94. So, and we've been best buds ever since to this day. So I grew up in Michigan. My musical interests, it's interesting, Kurt, because my mom was very young. She had me very, very young, and she had 3 brothers. And so they felt like brothers more than uncles to me. I mean, the youngest, she was the oldest. Her youngest brother was only like 3.5 years older than me. So growing up, late 70s, early 80s, my influences came from them. Well, one of the uncles played. So he played his acoustic. He was very, very good. And that's where it kind of all started for me was, Harry Chapin and James Taylor and that kind of stuff. And he was good and he sang. And I'm like, man, this is like the coolest thing. But the younger brother, who was the guy that was, 3.5, 4 years older than me, he was into the harder stuff, which back then was sort of Black Sabbath. And this is before Hair and all that kind of stuff. There was some Queen mixed in there. And then my mom loved soul, like, for lack of a better term, sort of, just soul. I mean, there's a little bit of disco in there, but it's like Hall and Oates and Lionel Richie and that kind of stuff. So that was always playing in the house. And that's where it all started. Yeah, especially with my uncle, playing that acoustic. And we'd get around the fireplace and I was just this little runt running around. I'm like, man, that's so cool. And he was good. And then it just got heavier, as I started young. Everything for me started young, hanging out with the uncles, first beer, all that stuff was like really,
No,
really
it was
early
like
for me.
15, 16,
No.
even younger.
Much younger.
So how old were you when
Yeah.
you picked up your first guitar?
So I'm a lefty. And being a lefty is hard, especially in that era, because you couldn't find a left-handed guitar to save
So
your
you
life.
were taking the right-handed guys and you were flipping them upside down.
And then just learning, simple chords, how to move bar chords up the fret, upside down, up the neck. And you learn a few things, and it was just a struggle. And then I think my first guitar was probably, it wasn't that early. It was probably like 14 years old. And it was a Les Paul copy. I think it was called a Hondo 2 or something, but it was left-handed. And that changed everything. So at that period, I was getting into the heavier stuff, and Hair was sort of just starting to
So
hit.
you talking about the radio was cranking up all this hair metal at this point in
Just
time?
starting.
Yeah.
It was Quiet Riot.
Yeah.
Right. That
Well, Van Halen
that
too
drum
was back
intro.
then, right?
Yeah. All the Van Halen stuff. But
That was a
when
great time period, man.
it was
Like the late
great,
70s into the early 80s.
it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was young
Were you
then. But
collecting records too? Like, did you have a record collection?
so it's funny. I just mentioned Quiet Riot. I was thinking about this on the way over. I'm like, shit, what's the first thing I ever actually owned? And it was that cassette tape of Quiet Riot. Going back earlier, another band that I liked a lot, going back to the kind of era you were talking about, was my aunt had this dipshit boyfriend, and he, had the Chevelle and he had the 8-track of Nazareth, and just riding around with them. And I was young, and that was a game changer because it was like, it's raw, it's loud guitars, loud drums, they're cussing, and it's like, this is a lot different than Lionel Richie kind of thing. And so that's where it started. Then, my friend group in the early 80s, mid to mid 80s, that's when thrash hit. The Hair stuff was interesting for me for a while, and I still like it. I liked it all through the 80s, all that. But we really started to get into, early Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax. And that was,
Was that more high school now? At
that
point?
was probably even pre-high school, like
Junior high?
junior high. Yeah. I'm an old guy. High school for me was more Hair, the later 80s kind of
Did
thing.
you ever go through a Kiss phase?
I always liked Kiss. I seen him a few times. I was never the biggest fan.
Because I
but
think a
I like
lot
'em.
of musicians I talked to on this show, they either grew up loving Kiss or they just didn't pay attention to Kiss.
I didn't pay a lot of attention to Kiss. I liked him. It's not that I don't like him. I certainly respect. As you get older and you learn about the business world, the marketing aspect of it, and what they put together. It's second to none. But musically, there's not a lot there that made me go wow, for whatever reason. Again, no offense to all the Kiss fans in the world, but I was just more of a hard rock guy. And then when that thrash stuff hit and the guitar playing, the musicianship, a lot of that early stuff doesn't get the credit it's due because the musicianship off the charts. I mean, incredible. All of that stuff. Not only is it fast and raw, but it was, the lead guitar playing, it was just incredible.
And some deep lyrics too.
Yeah, yeah, deep lyrics. That's where I was drawn. I liked it. I like that harder stuff. And then the hair stuff really hit. Of course, love Guns N' Roses and all that. And there's a lot of really incredible players. Vito Brato, the White Lion guy. It's like if you listen to the leads on that, it's mind blowing.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, he's
I
very
agree.
underrated.
You remember the first time you heard Appetite for Destruction?
Yeah,
I
I
remember it.
do. I won the album from the local radio station Z93, and we wore it out for years. I mean, it was incredible. It's still incredible. It's still a masterpiece to this day. And there are others there. I mean, going back to the thrash stuff, Ride the Lightning, going back, Kill 'Em All, Metallica now, Raw, loved it. Rolled a van, my first car, listening to Seek and Destroy. It was just great growing up, 16. And then Ride the Lightning was more polished, and it's like the songwriting is really evolving. And then Master of Puppets came out. It's a masterpiece. I mean, it's just there's not a bad measure on that album. I mean, it's incredible.
So were you the kind of kid that would like run home, put the record on, and get the headphones on, and turn off the lights, and sit there and just really listen to it, man, like really absorb it?
Yeah, I mean, me and my buddies, because we all played. I mean, they all played. A couple of them got very good very, very quickly. For whatever reason, they just had it. I still cannot play that stuff. I mean, that's not the type of player I evolved into. The super fast shred. I mean, it's just my synchronization isn't as good as some people, but I can fake a solo like nobody else.
I heard you play Eddie Van Halen the other night. You just did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, thank you. Tone is important. Attitude is important. So yeah. Some of it I can do, some of it I can't.
So then you started going to concerts. What were some of the bigger concerts that influenced you when you were young?
I went to growing up in Saginaw, Michigan. I mean, it's a smaller venue, Saginaw Civic Center back then, but all the big rock acts.
Michigan's a big Detroit area is a big rock and roll town.
Yeah.
Like a lot of bands like Motley Crue and Kiss, they always record
Seen them all.
the venues there because the fans are so rabid and just into it.
Love it. I can tell you, again, my uncles weren't very much older than me, so I got to tag along. So, I mean, for years there, it was 2 or 3 concerts a month. So it was great. I kept all my stubs, and somewhere along the years, I lost it all, and I could shed a tear over that. I'd love to see it. My first real concert, coincidentally, because you and I just went to see him a couple of weeks ago, was Sammy Hagar in I think the Voice of
Red
America.
Rocker.
Yeah. And that was mind-numbing.
He's still killing it at his age. What is he, 76?
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Sounds good, moves good, looks good. But back then he was running around on the rafters and all that.
He was the Red Rocker. So that was before he was in Van Halen.
Way before.
Solo
yeah.
act. Which, I was into him as a solo guy. And when he joined Van Halen, I was very, very happy.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I saw that first tour, the Monsters of Rock tour, with him really before they even released an album. And that was good too. I got a pick from it. Another thing I lost along the years.
Yeah, I think we all can say that we lost. I lost my entire record collection.
Yeah. Bummer.
I know.
Bummer.
Well, my mother threw it out.
Even worse.
It's a whole different story.
Jeez, what a horrible person. But the concerts, I mean, I tell you, my favorite concert of all time, and I've been to my share, was those high school years. I love Queensryche, and they were opening for Metallica, and they were doing, was it Operation Mindcrime, front to back, and the Saginaw Civic Center, the acoustics. When you're young, you don't know. As you get older, you realize, some of that sound kind of wasn't that great. They sounded perfect. And then Metallica came on and they crushed it. And where I lived, I mean, you could walk to the Civic Center. I mean, lived in kind of a rough area of town, but it was about a little over a mile. So we would gather at my house and we would walk over there, like 30 of us.
Maybe a couple of road sodas, a couple
maybe
beverages.
Yeah, maybe. And it was great. Here's another quick story. I think it was Kiss. I was riding with, again, I always hung out with the older guys. It was Kiss. I'm sure it was Kiss. It was either Kiss or Ozzy. And we had to drive like 10 miles. And I don't know what kind of hoopty he had. The brakes were out. the brakes were out completely. There were no brakes. It was the only way we could get to the concert was this guy, Steve Burdovich. Yeah, Steve Burdovich. And so you have the power brake, the emergency brake. So we drove 10 miles in snow only using that emergency brake, and we lived. So it's
That is a
again
crazy
a
story,
bit rock and roll.
right?
And I was young. I mean, I was probably 12 or 13 years
Sure.
old. Yeah, it's great. It's good
So
stuff.
tell me about your first band, like your first working band where actually you rehearsed, maybe you had a name for that band, and maybe you played in front of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me comment on that. Naming a band is not an easy thing to do. It's, if you've never been in a band or cover band, everybody has ideas. My family, my wife, my friends, they've given me hundreds of ideas over the year. And I'm like, look, ideas are ideas. Getting the other 3 or 4 or 5 guys on board with it, that's
Well,
a
it's got to be a
whole
cool name, first
other
of all.
realm. So my point is this: I've named 3 bands in my life, and I'm not going to repeat them because they're all terrible. They're just I'm not the right guy to name a band if you ask me to name a band. So, I mean, early on, I played a bit in high school, kind of sort of, and in college I did the acoustic thing, and that's when, my my freshman year of college was, I started September 91, right when, Nirvana Nevermind dropped. So it was just a crazy era. Here's my view of the era. When you go from Hair in the late 80s, around 89 to 91, it started to shift. Like I was really into Faith No More and some of that sort of rap rock stuff. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then of course when Nirvana dropped my freshman semester, everything changed. I mean, like overnight. It was like these sorority girls that had teased out Aquanet hair. A month later, you'd see them and they're in flannels and dreads. It was like crazy,
That was a
like
huge record.
as game changing. And I got to see it
Would you say
all
that
in
that
prime
was one of your
time.
top 3 game-changing records of all time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, not one of my favorite records. I like it, but it changed everything.
At the
It
time it came
was
out.
it was just ripe to
Gotcha.
change. Yeah, it was ripe to change. If you look at the movies from that era, like 90 and 91, it was just changing. It wasn't like 87 and 88 and 89. It was just, culture was changing and it was getting a little more serious maybe. And that's, Nirvana came and dropped and
So
it was
are
great
you one of those guys that thinks like the Seattle scene crushed the hair metal guys?
without question. But it wasn't just that. It was just, the culture was ripe for it. We wanted a change. It wasn't the 80s anymore. It wasn't, people just nothing but a good time. It was just changing, man. It was palpable. And I was of the age where I could feel it. And like I said, I was at university and it was great because I love that era of music. I love it, especially the harder stuff. I mean, Alice in Chains, probably, if you ask me to this day, probably my favorite band of all time. Right there,
From that
top
era?
of all time. I mean, it's right there. I could name a few others, but it's right there. I mean, I think they're excellent. And like I said, maybe not commercially. They did great commercially, but I mean, some of their B-side stuff, it's just, I love it. I love it. I could listen to it all day long.
I was a big fan of Pearl Jam when that came out, that 10
Yeah.
album.
Yeah.
That to me was one of the big albums.
See, it's, I don't know what it is about me. I just like it a little more edgy. I like Pearl Jam. I've covered a ton of Pearl Jam over the years. I do. I like it. But, compared to even some of the post-grunge stuff like Stone Temple, I love Stone
Oh
Temple,
yeah.
but Alice in Chains, if you said, you can only listen to Alice in Chains or Pearl Jam, that's an easy
Did you
choice for
see
me.
Alice in concert?
Yep.
How many
Couple
times?
times, couple few, before and after, Lane Staley died and they got the new guy in and he's fantastic.
I saw them after he died, and they were fantastic. I
They're
agree.
fantastic.
I couldn't believe how great they sang.
Yeah, that guy's
They,
good.
they were one of the best vocal bands I've heard of that genre.
It's perfect when you have a guitar or another, musician that can harmonize the way that he does. It's unbelievable. It's
There was another
magic.
band that I digged called Candlebox. Remember them?
Yeah,
Candlebox. They were
done quite a bit of that
yeah.
over the years. Yeah, I like
The
Candlebox.
Soundgarden.
Loved
I mean, we can go down
Soundgarden.
the list of all those.
Loved
Chris
Soundgarden.
Cornell is a genius, right?
Yeah,
Some of his solo stuff, I was listening to it the other day. Some of it's really deep, and he does a lot of really good covers.
and he could play. If you listen to just him with an acoustic, I think it was even on a radio show or a show like this, him doing "Fell on Black Days," just him. I mean, it's haunting. It's
Do you
unbelievably
think that
good.
obviously he committed suicide, right? Do you think that like his genius, like what, like when you found out that he died, I didn't understand why a young man would kill himself that was that famous. But then you start listening to his music and some of his dark lyrics, and you're like, well, maybe he was just a depressed guy. Always was a depressed guy.
Yeah.
What are your
I
thoughts
don't
on that?
know. I mean, I can't venture to say. I mean, I didn't know the man. It's sad though, especially with wife and kids and all that
And
kind of
what
stuff.
what a talent, right? To
And
lose.
all that
And
talent.
it's funny because a lot of rockers passed early, right?
Yeah.
A lot of really
From
talented
that era.
guys, right? Like Kurt Cobain, great
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're going
Yeah.
to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more to Todd Plesko of SYNR. So, Todd, you got some really good gear. Tell us about your gear. There's a lot of guys that are listening to this show, guitar players, that would love to know what you're playing through.
Thank you. Tone for me is everything. Is very, very important. And especially when, you're in a band that plays this wide variety. So I play through a Fractal. I've been with Fractal for, I shouldn't say I've been with Fractal. I've been using Fractal. I'm not sponsored by Fractal.
Not
I've been
yet.
I've been using Fractal for longer than most, a good 12 years now, when they were, I mean, a small company, and you can still reach out to the founder and he'll still reply to you to this day, but they're monsters now. And so I've had 5 different Fractal products over the years, and I have 2 now, the FM9 and the FM3. So it's digital, it's direct. And what I choose to do is I have a powered monitor, a big one. Today it's an EV, 12-inch subwoofer. And I run one line in from the mixer, and then I run one line directly from my Fractal into channel 2, so I can just turn down and, get my level right. In-ear monitors haven't stuck for me. I've tried. I have good
And that's
ones.
so funny because you actually got me into inner ears.
I know, man. I don't know what it is with me in ears. I just I finally got it to the point where it sounds really, really good, the mix in my ears, but for me, I feel disconnected because of the way that I play. And I try to, I play wirelessly. I played wirelessly for a long, long time now. So you'll notice when we play, we're all wireless. Most of the guys are in ears except for me and the bass player, but we get out. I mean, we go into the audience, we get up on tables, we do all that kind of, crazy stuff you do when you're a kid, not when you're in your 50s, but we do it anyways because we like to engage. So if I have a solo coming up or something and I see an exit off the stage, I'll go and, try and
Yeah,
do
and I
my
think the
show off
people
thing.
like that, they enjoy seeing you out there walking
Yeah,
around.
it's fun. It's fun. But the in-ear monitors have never stuck with me because I just feel a bit isolated. They call it the occlusion effect. It's like if you take your fingers and you stick them in your eardrums and it just sounds like you're sort of underwater. For whatever reason, for me, that's a really uncomfortable sensation. I know a lot of your viewers will say, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. Probably true, but I just don't, I don't like it. And I like it
It's a
loud.
preference. Listen,
Yeah.
here's the thing though. Here's what you got to be careful about. You don't want your stage volume to be too loud now. See,
Well, again,
so
we only have 2 monitors on stage for me and the bass player, so it's not too loud. Sorry to interrupt you, but the technology now, it's pretty rare we would get some feedback. I mean, we just, like I said, the guy who runs sound for us, our singer, David Lee, he's really, really good at it. And so I think we get a good tonal quality.
my experience with inner ears is this: I use them both. Obviously, when I'm outdoors, I don't use them. We do a lot of outdoor stuff like festivals. But when I'm indoors in certain venues, I have to have them. And I notice that it makes me a better singer.
Sure.
I can harmonize better. I can hear everything.
Yep.
Now, sometimes I've actually taken one out.
Yep.
So I'll take out the right one and keep the left one in because then I can hear what's going on as far as
Yeah.
talking. Don't you hate it when you have your inners on and somebody asks you a question
Drives me
and then you got
nuts.
to pull them out and then
Yeah.
you got them in just nice. Now you got to take them out and then you got to put them back in again.
Yeah.
And they never seem to sit right.
Yeah. Well, mine, again, not to be a snob here, but I went all the way to get, go to the audiologist and they put the foam in and they make a
Oh
mold.
yeah,
And I mean, I have really, really good ones, top to bottom. I just, I don't fucking like them.
sure. Well,
That's it.
at the end of the day, it's all about making you comfortable on stage and you
Yeah.
sound good. Because look, SYNR sounds fantastic. And like you mentioned, you have a very good sound person who's actually a band member, right? So David, who's a singer, can walk out with the tablet. And I saw them the other day. He actually brought his microphone and he was singing as he's mixing you
It's
guys.
unbelievable,
You
right?
know?
I mean, without paying a guy just to run sound, and that's the benefit of having two singers, so he can do that. But he knows his gear. I mean, in the digital age, you just even in the analog age, I should say, it's an underappreciated art form to actually know your gear and know how to actually
I can
use
attest to
it.
that.
I mean, especially like I said, when Behringer and these digital mixers came out and people are doing it on iPads, it's a pet peeve of mine, man. I can't. It's hard for me to go hear a band that I like when the mix sucks. And maybe it's me being a snoot, but it's just it's not that hard anymore, right? And you don't need thousands of dollars of gear. You need someone who knows how to run it.
It's so funny you say that because after the Van Halen concert, Van Hagar, you called me up and and we agreed it was a great show, but we both agreed the sound didn't sound as good as it could, and that's because you and I are musicians and we understand sound. I mean, it was still fantastic. I'm glad I went,
Yeah.
but like it could have been better,
Yeah.
right? And you and I realized
Yeah.
that.
And my theory on that, right, was it was rainy, if you recall. And so Loverboy, the opening act, didn't get a chance to go on. So it went straight to, Van Hagar or whatever. And so my theory is the sound people just didn't have a chance to iron out the
That's a very good point
kinks in the
because
levels.
that's technically a lot of people forget the opening act is partly to fix the
Rarely
sound.
does it sound as good as the headliners. So, yeah, it was great though, man. It was great. It was great to see it all. And yeah, the sound wasn't great. I thought Sammy was a little too low. I thought Jason Bonham's kick drum was a little bit too low. But by the sixth or seventh song, it started to sound pretty tight
Well,
to
it's
me.
funny because I agree with you. I go out and see a lot of bands. When I'm not performing, I'm out seeing bands. In fact, I just saw you guys this past Saturday night.
Yeah,
And
thank-
there's a lot of really good bands out there. I mean, a lot of really good bands. And some of them are better than others because of their production. Like there's one particular band that because they have an incredible light show and they actually have a sound technician, it's like you're really getting your money's worth.
Yep.
Where there's other bands that maybe don't have, they're still good, but they don't have the sound, the lights, they don't have the huge production. So,
Yeah.
there's different levels of that. I think Jacked Up, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase our production value. We're trying to get better lighting, better signage.
Yep.
Finally, our drummer finally has a drum head that says Jacked Up on it. Which,
Nice.
because we went through so many different drummers that nobody wanted to commit to doing that.
Yeah. It's $35 to have that vinyl put on. Agree. We do a lot of that. A, it's a bit expensive. B, you got to haul all that shit in and haul it all out.
Do you still have a trailer?
Yeah, David does.
Because you alone have good gear. I mean, you've done sound for me when you were not working. You've actually brought your gear
Yep.
and you've done Jacked Up sound. And I remember you pulled up with your truck, you had a trailer, and it was all loaded with stuff.
I can do it. I have a Yukon, so I can do it in the Yukon now. I still have all that gear, but David brings a lot of gear.
Right.
I mean,
He's a gear guy.
we run what's the equivalent of usually 4, 2,000-watt subwoofers. I mean, that's a lot of muscle.
You could do an outside show with no problem. Like a
Yeah,
big one.
we do it all the time. But David is a drummer by trade, and he likes that kick drum to punch,
As
and
it
so do
should.
I do. So when if you come to one of our shows, you're gonna feel it. And when you start doing the pop stuff, it's important. That bass hits you in the mid region, and it makes you want to shake your hips. It's great. But there are some bands that show up with, the guitar player has 3 pedals into, 1x12, and he's a fantastic player, and he knows how to tune his instrument, not the guitar, the amp, the pedals. And they're a great band, a 3-piece. Some of the best bands out there walk in with one load of gear and a shitty PA. And to me, it's the best part of it. And then some bands are in the middle like us, and some bands like the one you were mentioning bring in the big show and the big crew. The thing about, I think I know the band you're talking about, the thing about them is they're incredibly talented. I mean, but for me, it's standards. It's a lot of standard music that I've heard 19,000 times in my life. So I tune out a bit.
I agree. In fact, Jacked Up, we're trying to learn new stuff because we're kind of getting tired and bored of the same old stuff.
Yeah.
Now, people still enjoy this stuff. I mean, there's certain songs that we do that we have a full dance floor.
Yep.
So it's kind of hard to shelve those when people are really enjoying them,
Us too.
you
Us
know?
too. Yeah.
But I don't think we'll ever be like SYNR because you guys really are obscure choices that work.
But you know the
I mean, you have an
songs.
imagination, obviously, because
They're
you're
obscure
doing
top 10
medleys, but you're
hits.
also mashing things that normally
Yeah.
people wouldn't even consider
Love
mashing.
medleys. Yeah. I mean, a medley we do is like I said, what is it? Mashed potato to Soul Man to Twist and Shout to Baby Got Back. And it's like, huh? It makes absolutely no sense in the whole world. And then when you do it, it flows and the dance floor is full for 12 minutes. It's great.
Are you doing 3 1-hour sets? Are you doing the 45-minute sets? Or like how do you set up your show?
And this is Steve, our singer, to his credit, we're all pretty experienced. We've been through it a lot. What we do is a little different. We do an hour set and then we do like an hour 20-minute set for set 2. So the money set, that's when the bars are usually the busiest. It's when people are at the right state of being inebriated and you get the best dancers. So that's our money set. We
I
do a
agree.
lot of pop, a lot of country in that set. And then we have a relatively short third set, which is more heavy usually. And the theory there is, the real rockers stick around to the third set. So there's a lot of logic built into our set list flow.
Do you ever play beyond your designated time? Or do you pretty much like if you're gonna end at midnight, excuse me, you end at midnight?
Yeah, and I'm going to sound horrible here. It's often or sometimes where the venue will come and say, "Can you play 7 more
That's why I'm
songs?"
bringing this
And
up, because
and
some
they
venues do that. And
I
some will
mean,
pay you and some won't.
well, ugh, I don't think we would do it if we're not getting paid, but if we're getting paid well, I think we would. I know that sounds so horrible. I'll play all night long. I know the guys would too, but when you get to 1:30 in the morning, and we all work day jobs, it's hard to just keep playing unless they're compensating,
Sure.
which is fair. I mean, in that scenario, right, Kurt, the bar's busy still at the end of the night, and the bar's making
Sure
money,
they are.
and people are boogieing and dancing, and it's going well. A smart bar manager will come and say, "Give you a couple
Right.
$100 to play, some more
Sure.
songs."
What is your thoughts on people coming up for requests? And on top of that, they may throw in a 20, a 50, $100. I'll just tell you a quick story before you answer. So, for some reason, people where we play love to hear Sweet Home Alabama. And there are people that will come and legitimately put like up to $100 in the tip jar and say, I'd like to hear Sweet Home Alabama.
Hmm.
Now, we will play it. Not even for the $100. We'll do it anyway because we're that kind of band.
It's a great song.
But it's a very played out song. It's a very boring song, but people love it. What are your thoughts at SYNR when people come up to the stage and approach you?
Again, I'm going to sound like a greedy capitalist here. I don't mean to do that, but you've heard the old cliche, just write it on the back of a $50 bill kind of thing. We always try to accommodate. I mean, I feel like we're very intimate with our fans. I mean, we're very approachable. We all mingle in between sets. We don't run out to our car kind of thing. I mean, it's a couple times a night we do it. And it's not about the money at that point. It's if we know the song and we can do it justice and it fits in. Sometimes you get some wonky stuff. Some gal asked for Coldplay the other day, and we're like, if you see us, you know what I mean. It's like,
Well,
do you,
yeah,
do you think we play Coldplay?
exactly.
Come on, man.
Or how about when they try to talk to you in the middle of a song and they lean up and they're trucking in? I'm like, listen, I'm in the middle of a song. I mean, I shake my head like, please don't bother me. I'm trying to play my guitar here, and I'll talk to you maybe later. But yet
Yeah,
they're persistent on talking to you
yeah.
and making a stupid
There's a
request.
word for those people,
Yeah,
right?
we know.
Assholes. It's just dumb. It's just clueless. People drink. It doesn't bother me too much because I can't hear them anyways. So I'm just kind of do the nod and,
Well, you know what I've thought,
walk around the
Todd, and this
stage.
happened to me. We become musicians, but then we graduate to entertainers, right?
Yeah,
So now we're jacked ups. Now we're entertaining people. So sometimes we have to remember it's not about us, man. It's not about me getting my beer buzz.
agree.
It's about entertaining the crowd. See, at first it was about me when I was starting out. Then it was about me joining the party, right, and getting just as drunk as the people in the audience. Then I graduated to a point where like I'm not even going to drink. I'm just going to put on a fantastic show because that's what I'm being paid to do,
Yep.
And then I'll go home. It's like a business now,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. Yeah. My journey is I work really hard in my career and I need it for an outlet. I mean, I do it for an outlet because I like playing music with my buddies. When you're in the groove and it's just sounding right, when the mix is right and the audience is digging it, it really is great. I mean, it really is great. I don't judge people on if they're drinking, if they're not drinking, whatever. But there's a fine line between going too far.
But don't you love that electricity that you get, that adrenaline rush you get, that like non-drug high? You know, like the great thing about being a musician and like even as local cover bands as we are, you're playing music and people are dancing and they're digging it. And you get this tremendous rush, at least I do, when I'm on stage, man. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like I'm still able to do this, you know? I'm getting these people off, man. And they'll come up to you at the break or after the show and tell you how much they loved it and how much fun it was, you know? And it's not just about the tips, man, or the drinks. It's just about the appreciation. And I'm going
Yeah.
to keep doing this as long as people appreciate Jacked Up and they appreciate what we're doing. That to me is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the best, yeah, full dance floor is the best. When the mix sounds right, when my mix on stage sounds right, it's heavenly. In between sets, if somebody comes up and says, "Man, I really like your playing," that's great. What really gets me going as a tone junkie is when another guitarist comes up and says, "Man, you really sound good in the mix. Your tone is spot on for that song," or whatever. Because I put a lot of pride into it. I put time into it, crafting tones for individual songs. So that to me is rewarding.
You know, it's funny you say that because a few podcasts ago, the guest that I had sitting in your chair, we were talking about various tones of different guitar players. And now we actually go out and critique bands based on the guitar player's tone.
Every time for me,
Which I don't do it publicly.
every
I do
time.
it inside because there's one particular guy. He's not that well known in the area, but yet he has the best tone that I think I've ever heard,
Yep.
and it's
Makes a
incredible.
difference,
It
doesn't
makes a
it?
huge difference. And some
Yep.
people might say he's a little too loud, but you know what? If the tone is right, I'm cool with it being a little loud, right?
But that's the sound
I just
guy's
don't want it.
job.
I don't want it loud and be horrible tone.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
giving me
Agree.
great Marshall tone, that
Yeah.
Gibson Les Paul into a Marshall, and he's playing the Ted Nugent on that great stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, let it be a little loud, because that's like that's rock and roll, man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Totally, totally, totally agree. Like I said, it's just being a snoot for a minute. A bad mix is nails on a chalkboard to me. Bad guitar tone is like two hands of nails on a chalkboard for me. I struggle with it because it's not that hard. I mean, if you're buying an amp, um, with the internet the way it is now, if you say, I want to sound, like Pat Benatar or ZZ Top or Alice in Chains or whatever, the settings are all there. If you buy a direct modeler like I use with Fractal, I mean, you can download them and it sounds like almost exact. I mean, you kind of have to go out of your way to screw it up. So it's just different than when we were younger, when it was more
So
brittle.
if you could explain that to the audience that perhaps isn't as technically oriented, like what does that mean when someone says, "Do you have a patch to play this?"
Yeah.
How do you dummy that down and explain to somebody what that means?
Sure. So, I mean, it's basically a computer on the floor with buttons on it, with, foot switches on it. And if you're with one of the bigger ones, they're the big ones out there. There's, Line 6, Kemper, Fractal. They have these huge user communities. And some people will get entrepreneurial and they will create their own patches and sell them to you for $7 a piece. I mean,
Now, when
it's
they
not
create
very
a
much
patch, what
money.
does that mean? What are they
A
doing?
patch is just a software file that you upload onto your modeler, your little computer, that's your pedal board on the floor. And, you save it as a preset. So number 19 is my ZZ Top preset, or number 20 is my Sweet Home Alabama preset. And somebody else in the world has dialed it in to sound perfect.
So it's going to sound like Alan Collins or Gary Rossington
Whatever you want.
when you're doing the
In the
Sweet Home
fractal
Alabama.
world, you can get anything. You can get all this obscure
And you could
stuff.
probably drive yourself insane, like staying up all night trying to like download and set stuff up like a mad scientist.
Or tweaking it. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with floor modelers, the digital modelers, is you can spend more time tweaking it than actually practicing. I've been victim to that.
But that's your geek side, right? That's the geek
Yeah, I
side
love
of
it.
Todd.
I love it.
That you're really into that stuff
Yeah.
more so than others, I think.
And it's convenient. They break less. I mean, in the early days, they didn't sound good at all. It just sounded digital. But now, I mean, the technology is really solid. So I still have tube amps. I have a Hughes and Kettner. I have a dual rectifier. And every time I pull them out, I like it because it punches you in the ears more. but it's just it's not nearly as versatile as the Fractal.
So you have a lot of guitars at home. I've seen some of them. What are your go-to guitars? What do you have on stage with you?
So, as a lefty, there are certain manufacturers that are better to lefties. Over the last 10 years, Paul Reed Smith, PRS, they've gotten a lot better at offering lefties. And Schecter has always been good. These are not big names, they are. They really are big names, but it's not Fender or Gibson. So I have a lot of those, but I have a lot of everything. I have a couple of the, EVH models that I really, really like. I'm really digging the PRS and the Schecters these days. I have an old Schecter that I modified, did a bunch of mods to it, and I probably played more gigs with that guitar than any other guitar. I bought it for $300,
So
but it just
that's your go-to.
it just plays well.
Yeah, everyone's got one. I got my
Just
bass.
plays
I
well.
went out and bought a new bass, but my Fender Jazz is still my baby, and I sit it. I can't stop playing it. I just love it. It just feels
Yeah,
fantastic.
whatever
You
works.
know.
And again, I change the pickups on all my guitars. I usually change the nut.
You do everything yourself.
Some, not all of it. I have a tendency to screw it up.
You know who I'm working with, man? Lenny Brooks Jr. of Twinkle's band.
Yeah.
He also does guitars, sets up guitars. He's a luthier.
Yep.
He's fantastic. So if you
Yeah.
ever need a guy to do heavy duty work,
I do. I have
let me know.
I have a job. I want to route an old Telecaster, an American Tele that I have. I want to route it to put, again, left-handed, put a Floyd Rose in it. So I've got a guy. Here, that works for Dean. He's fantastic. And when I get myself into trouble, I go to him, which is often. So when you say, "Can you do it yourself?" I'm like, "Eh."
Yeah,
But I enjoy it. It's one of those
it's
things
like a
I
hobby.
enjoy. I get myself into trouble.
So let's talk about hobbies and interests. So you're quite a fisherman because you've invited me on your boat many, many times. And the K Rock likes boats, but the K Rock, I guess what happened was I saw Jaws in 1976.
Yeah.
And my biggest fear is I'm going to be stuck in the water and there's going to be that music down, 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 down. So that's why I don't go on boats often.
Yeah,
Isn't that
really?
crazy?
Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah, I like to fish. I like to boat. So I'm blessed to be able to do it. I get out on the water as much as I can. I work a lot, but yeah, I like it.
What do you like about it though? What's the best part about being out there?
I just like fishing. I mean, growing up in Michigan, you fish
Is it
and you
peaceful?
hunt.
Like do you like just find like you can chill and like get your
Sometimes
brain off of stuff?
we live on the water, so again, we're blessed where we hit the button and the boat's in the water. So my wife and I'll go out, whenever we can, but sometimes it's only for an hour and a half. And if you catch something, great. If you don't catch anything, great. It's just nice to bring the dog and the wife and get on the
What
water.
kind of fish are out there? Like what are you typically going after or catching?
Grouper and snapper mostly, but then we're blessed here, man. On Tampa Bay, we're super blessed because you have all the reef fish like grouper and snapper, and then you have the flats fish like snook and redfish and trout and everything in between. And then every now and then we'll go, offshore, 30, 40 miles offshore. And then, there's other varieties
And
of
do you actually eat the fish you're catching?
I do
So you take them home, you clean them,
all the time.
cook them. You're good at that stuff.
I am.
Wow,
I like it.
because that alone
But
is
I've been
art,
doing that since I was a kid. I
right?
mean, cleaning fish. So we have a freezer full of fish at any given
The
time.
fish freezer, you call
It's just a drawer, but it's
it?
stuffed. I mean, there's a lot of grouper, there's a lot of snapper, there's some American pompano, there's
I've been
all
to your
kinds
house.
of
You have a
stuff.
beautiful house, and your
Thank you.
house to me is such a party house. Like the way it's set up, it's designed for parties.
Thank you.
And it's funny too because you seem to always have a party at your house. There's always
Yeah,
something going on.
we're pretty social. I mean, a lot
Because
of it's based around the kids
right,
and their
because your kids are at
milestones.
that age now where they're like college aged and they're having their friends over and stuff, and there's always a graduation somewhere or
Yeah.
there's something.
Well, they're all out of the house now. So oldest, she is finishing up her last year of law school at Wake Forest. She actually leaves tomorrow to go back to finish up. So a year from now, hopefully she'll be a bar admitted attorney, which is wild. And then all of our kids played music growing up, which is some of my
You know what?
best.
I was going to ask you that story.
Yeah.
Can we go there now?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
actually put your kids in a band, like you got them set up with the gear. I think your wife made the name, right? Remember we talked about band names. I want to say Pinky Swear. Was that
It
what it's
was
called?
Pinky Swear. I
Which
think
is a
I
cool name.
named that one. It's my one
But they were little
credit.
kids and they were playing like the whole, like they were brothers and sisters in the same, like a Partridge Family thing.
Yeah.
Could you explain how that all started?
Yeah, I mean, I played and, we had our daughter. All our kids are 2.5 years apart. So girl, boy, boy. And before the third one, Luke, was born, Nick was showing interest in guitar, and then he started to sort of kind of get good at it. And we nurtured with, lessons and things like that. Then Macy said, the older sister, well, I want to do something. So we gave her a bass. She's a lefty like me. Then we put them both in vocal lessons. Then we had Luke. So out of the womb, we were just putting drumsticks in Luke's hands.
You're like, you have to be a drummer because we need it.
And like a fish to water, it happened. So by the time Luke was 7, they were performing gigs. So they did it for about 8 years, 7, 8 years.
That's
through
amazing.
their childhood.
So it was a 3-piece.
It was a 3-piece.
And they all sang?
And they all sang. And then they started to get really good. They recorded, half of an album that Macy had wrote. Great story there as well. She was getting to that age where she's 14, whatever, 15. She's getting rebellious. We caught her sneaking out of the house. So I grounded her for a whole summer. And I said, here's how you can shorten your sentence, because she had been writing. I said, finish the album, finish the lyrics and let's see what we got. So she did. And she called it Ungrounded because she wanted to be ungrounded.
Great name.
But those are my best musical experiences because they were doing 20 gigs a year.
But you actually had like a concert set up where there was a stage, right? And people came.
Well, we had a barn at our last house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Remember, the interesting thing about Fort Wayne, where we were for almost 20 years, is we lived 4 miles from Sweetwater. When I moved to Fort Wayne, Sweetwater was in a house. And there was like 30 people working it was a house. Later, after they built the complex that they're at now, which has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. So we just lived at Sweetwater. So they, helped the kids. There was just very vibrant musical community in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for a smaller city, a mid-sized city. Very vibrant because of Sweetwater. So we had a barn. We built a big stage, disco ball, lights built in. It was fabulous. And we would throw parties a few times a year just to bring the other bands in. And of course, Pinky Swear would play. And some of the best times of my life because it was great because I guess I was in maybe my 40s by then. And these parents would come and I'd get a keg of beer and our, kids would be up there. And I remember our kids were doing a cover of Big Balls by AC/DC, way back in the day, and they hammed it up and it was fun. It was great. I have video of it. It was so great. I'm sitting there talking to this sort of Karen woman, I'm like, would you like a beer? And she's like, I'm like, it is a party. It's in a barn. We are adults. You can have beer if you want. And then the kids started playing Big Balls and she just kind of went like, she just didn't know how to react. And I'm like, it's a sad commentary because growing up, it was great. And then, just going to a party and listening to your friends play live music or whatever. And so when we had those parties, they just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew because because rock and roll is rock and roll. It doesn't matter what era you're in. I know the kids don't listen to the same rock and roll I listen to. Maybe some of them do. But that live music experience became very popular very quickly. And those kids hadn't experienced it. And so the next party, that same suburban woman, she was all into it. She finally let her hair down and said, I remember this from when I was a kid, and I'm going to let my hair down and get into the music and get into the spirit. And I'm pretty sure she had a beer.
I wish more parents would do what you did. I think that's awesome.
It was great.
Getting your kids, because it teaches them how to work together, right? Obviously, number one. Teaches them how to do something, with music. Right? And maybe there'll be a Pinky Swear reunion someday.
Yeah, we keep talking about it. We keep talking about it. But the music stuck with them. So Nick, went to the University of Florida and studied music, and he has his degree in theory and composition. He's going to grad school, so it stuck with him.
Wow.
Macy plays with some friends at law school.
Still
stuck with her.
No kidding.
And Luke has his electronic drum set. He's at the United States Air Force Academy. So we are very, Brenda and I, we stressed achievement in our household. So, the academics portion of what they're going to do with their life is super, super important to us.
Yeah,
so
your kids are very well adjusted.
Our kids are high achieving and,
no doubt.
but the music stuck with them. And that's probably my proudest achievement.
But do you think that
marriage.
music perhaps helped them to become better students and help them to make more friends and be more personable and outgoing?
Of course.
Right?
It trains your brain.
Yeah, man. No doubt.
Without question. Of any program you're going to cut in a high school or a grade school, music should probably be the last.
It's so funny. Brittany Jones, my lead singer, she actually teaches music and drama and art That's what she's paid to do at a small school in
That is
Bloomington.
great.
Yeah, because I
Salute.
said to her, I go, "Isn't that odd that there's a budget for that still?" Because you always hear about
Yeah.
schools whacking that part, and I'm so happy that they didn't, because she tells me the kids are so excited to be in her classroom.
Yeah. So that's Nick. Nick, he'll go get his master's degree and then he wants to teach at the college level.
Wow.
And I'm like, how cool is that? And then
So he'll be Dr. Plesko.
you can still perform. He'd have to get his PhD to be Dr.
He
Plesko,
will.
but we'll see. But the kid loves music and he had a couple of those professors. He did some like history of rock class and he got so into it and he's like, that's it. That's what I
That's a
want to
great
do.
class, the history of
Is that a
rock.
great class?
Imagine that? They probably start off with, like, the 40s and get you into the 50s, the pop idols, and then they go to the 60s. Like,
Yeah.
there's definitely a story there, you know?
Yeah. There's a great story. I just posted a video on my Facebook. I saw it's one of those vines. It's like this 2-minute video and there's no voiceover in it. And it shows the history of rock and roll from the late 40s to now and how it evolved. It's fantastic. I mean, watch it, from Buddy Holly to Elvis
Frank
to
Sinatra, I think,
all
was
of
the
it.
first pop idol. He
All
was
of it.
before Elvis.
Yeah.
People went crazy when Frank Sinatra showed up, even though he wasn't rock and roll.
Yeah.
But I think that, it set the stage for the next guys to come.
It was great. It was
And the Beatles, obviously.
it's been a journey, it's been great. And I'm proud that I think I caught the best eras. I mean, the 80s and the 90s to me, I mean, again, I'm biased because I lived it. Fabulous, man. It was fabulous music and still is to this day. It still sustains to this day.
So that's a great point here. So wrapping up our show, what do you love about music? What do you love the most about what you're currently doing?
As a cover band person, I like it when the dance floor is full. I like it when the mix is just right, when I'm feeling the kick drum and the bass and I'm blending into the mix just right. That's what I love. But music as a whole, we just touched on it. You see what it can do to a young person, um, especially rock and roll. I mean, rock and roll has an energy and spirit and rebellion about it that nothing else can do. There's nothing else in life, culturally, socially, that has had the impact that rock and roll
Do you think
has.
the music industry today is changing for the better, for the worse? Are you indifferent to it?
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on
worse.
the whole, Taylor Swift stuff going on?
I mean, total, not my cup of tea, but total respect from she's a machine. And what's interesting, she appears to listen to her advisors, which a lot of people that are becoming really, really important in something they choose not to do. She has. And now she's a machine. She is on her way to eclipsing Elvis. She's young enough to do it. If she continues to listen to her advisor, she'll be the biggest selling artist of all time.
Sure.
So, not my cup of tea, but music as a whole, I mean, the digitization of it, Spotify, all that, I can't imagine that's really great for a lot of artists. I know a lot of artists that get 38-cent checks in the mail, from Spotify. I mean, you can't live off that clearly. But if you are indie or you want to self-fund, getting your music out there, it's much easier. So double-edged sword.
Isn't it funny how a lot of 80s and 90s bands are making these massive comebacks now? We're like, well, because we go to the same arenas,
Yeah.
right, in Tampa, and
Yeah.
you'll see like Creed's coming, right, and they're going to sell out. And Creed hasn't been doing anything for a long, long time. And they only had a few records, but they were powerful records, and they have a lot of fans. So isn't it wonderful how a lot of these 80s and 90s bands are just getting a second wind?
Yeah. I mean, what does that say to you? To me, it says two things. A, the music that they created had staying power through that shift of, getting signed by a label and A&R person finding you all the way to the full digitization of music. Everything's Apple Music and Spotify now. So they had staying power. And number two is, a lot of the music out nowadays sucks. It doesn't have that staying power. Some of these hit wonders, like going back to Piggy Swear, I don't know, Arctic Monkeys or some of these band, I don't even know who they are. They had some really interesting songs and you never hear them anymore. They just didn't have the staying power. I think it's very flighty now. I think you can have a big, big hit and it's quickly replaced by other big hits and it just falls into oblivion. And that's what digital music has done. So you name a band outside of Taylor Swift that 30 years from now is going to be able to sell out stadiums like Van Hagar or Creed or any of these other bands are doing, or Def Leppard to this day, or Journey.
I was just gonna say, I went to the Journey Def Leppard concert, and they were phenomenal. It sounded fantastic. They
Great.
played
The
all their hits.
pros.
Def Leppard's a great example of a band with staying power because that album came back in the early
Yeah.
'80s. I think their early stuff probably was late '70s, right? Their very beginning.
It's great
But their popular
songs.
stuff was in the '80s, right?
Yep.
And those songs were powerful and they're great songs and they still on the radio to this day.
Can you imagine?
And there are people that said it in the arena. I was sat next to a couple. They're like, "Love Stinks," or not "Love Stinks." "Love Bites"
Yeah, Love Bites. Great
was
song.
like a romantic song to them, and they started slow dancing right in the
Yeah.
aisle.
So name one performer, artist out there besides Taylor Swift that might have anywhere near the staying power that those bands we just
You
mentioned.
can't.
It's impossible.
You can't.
None.
But then again, so you got to remember the people that are buying records. Well, I don't know. Maybe young kids buy records too, or do people still buy records, or they just download? They just pick what they want.
The
They cherry pick.
purists buy records.
You can just cherry pick now your songs. You don't have to buy the whole thing, right?
You don't even have to buy it, dude. I mean, you just have a subscription and you can listen to it whenever you want. So I use Apple Music. And Apple Music, in theory, gives the artists, a piece of that play. It's per play. So I haven't bought music in 15 years. I stream it. And I think it's bad for a lot of those artists. It's good for Taylor Swift. It's good for the indie artists or self-funded artists that want to get their music out. You can do it. You can record an album in your basement and it'll sound good with the equipment. You can do it for $5,000 and get it out there for people to listen to. You could never do that before. So in that regard, it's awesome. But in terms of, the legacy, getting signed by a label and getting an album and the marketing and getting out on tour, very, very little of that anymore from what I see.
Well, Todd, thanks for coming in today.
My pleasure.
How can people find out about SYNR? How can they see and learn about your future SYNR shows?
Sure. I mean, it's primarily Facebook at SYNR Tampa. Our schedule's published there. There's pics and videos. We're working on a new promo now. But I'd say this, come check us out, come party with us. You'll see what our show's about. It's incredibly unique. And we'd hope that we'd create a fan in you if you come see us.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, brother.
Thanks, man.
We'll see you soon.
Good seeing you, buddy.
Alrighty.
All right.